So I want to talk about the story of Sleeping Beauty, and I want to talk about the allegory and deeper meaning that I think it holds in relationship to the masculine and the feminine polarity, as well as to the journey of soul awakening, true love, and divine counterparts. So I'm going to focus primarily on the Disney version of this story just because it is the version that most of us do know and are familiar with, and I'm going to touch on that again a little bit later in the video as to why I think that is relevant and important. So getting into the story, we'll start with the birth of Aurora. So the story begins with the celebration of the princess's birth. Everyone in the kingdom is elated. Her parents have waited their whole lives for her. Everyone's excited and happy. So she's born into this life of privilege. She's born to the king and queen. The entire kingdom adores her. She's born into what on the outside should have seemingly been a beautiful, perfect life. And then in comes Maleficent, and Maleficent is a really interesting character in this story. I kind of relate Maleficent somewhat to the devil energy in the tarot, and she kind of plays the role of a few different shadow archetypes that we encounter. So when she first arrives at the birth of Aurora, she places a curse on the baby's head. And in this moment, I think that this represents the family karma and ancestral trauma that exists within our family bloodlines before we are even born. We are born into these cycles, and they're kind of placed upon us without any choice. So when this happens, she also is introduced to her fairies, and her fairies in the story represent her spiritual guides, and they are there to guide her, they are there to protect her, and they are also there to bestow gifts on her. So while she is cursed upon birth, she's also bestowed with these beautiful gifts. And even though her guides are there to protect her and to bestow these gifts on her, they cannot, however, change what is ultimately destined for her. So the fairies and her parents, they make the decision that the best thing for them to do in this situation is to hide her away from the world. So they take her away in the night and they take her deep into the forest and they change her identity. So this is where she becomes Briar Rose. And through this decision, what they thought was the best for her. So this kind of represents the unconscious action of the parent. To them, they thought that they were making the decision to protect her. But really what this sheltering did was kind of deny her own autonomy. So who could she have been, and how could her journey have been different if she had known just not about the curse, but also about the gifts that she had? When she became Briar Rose, she had no idea that she was this princess and that she had all these beautiful gifts because she was hidden away in the forest. How could she have known? So during this time, Maleficent is obsessed with Aurora, and she's searching the kingdom endlessly for her, and she's obsessed with kind of making sure that this curse that she's placed has come to pass. And her energy is interesting in this particular section of the story because I believe that she kind of represents those unseen karmic forces. So Aurora is moving through life and she has no idea that these forces are kind of working against her in a way. And this can come in the form of jealousy, resentment, control from outside forces, whether that's, masculine or feminine energy. And in this story, and specifically, Maleficent kind of plays that feminine role. So that could be seen as, female jealousy, people that are, working against you behind the scenes, things like that. So she kind of represents this unconscious journey that Rose is on, that she's moving through life and she's unaware of this stuff. So this is kind of like before the spiritual awakening. But all the while that she's in this phase of her life, she has these visions and dreams of her destiny and of true love. And So she's out in the forest and she's singing this song, and the animals are her friends, and she kind of lives in this idealistic, make-believe fantasy experience of love. And she really struggles with her experience of isolation and her uncertainty over whether this dream is ever going to become a reality for her. And she also struggles with feeling overburdened, overprotected, and restricted by the circumstances that she finds herself in. And I think that kind of comes back to her not even really knowing who she really is at this point. So she's kind of letting the outside world control her experience. So she's in the forest, she's singing her song, and they end up finding each other. And little did they know at the time that they were actually betrothed to each other. So they were destined to marry each other regardless of whether she had gone off into the woods and this whole, the curse had been placed on her head and whatever. This was always the plan of their families, was for them to marry. But separate from those identities that were placed on them, they ended up finding each other anyway in the woods. And they fall in love, and they have this beautiful experience of true love together. And then they have to go their separate ways. And this time in separation, though they always love each other the whole time, and love is kind of like their guiding light as they move through these very different and specific solo journeys that they go on. So the prince realizes right away that he's in love with her, and he is ready to give up this whole life that was kind of laid out ahead of him. So he rushes back to his father. He tells his father about this woman in the forest that he met, and of course his father has a problem with that. And the prince has kind of lived his own version of a sheltered life, in the sense that he probably has been adored and loved and could have had any woman in the kingdom that he desired, and he's had this pre-planned life and destiny towards king laid out before him, and meeting her changes everything, and he's ready to throw that all away for her. So he goes back to find her, and he ends up getting captured by Maleficent. And Maleficent takes him to the castle and locks him away. So her energy in this part of the story is really interesting to me. So I think that she represents the masculine relationship to toxic feminine energy. So this can represent the mother wound. So the mother wound can manifest in a ton of different ways, but just to give an example, it can be, desiring approval or validation from the feminine because maybe you didn't receive it from the mother, or maybe the mother was very controlling or domineering. There's a lot of different ways, but I feel like Maleficent's restriction of Prince Philip in this scene kind of represents the relationship to this toxic karmic feminine energy. And this can also be from past relationships. So, codependent relationships that have created energetic cords that keep you trapped in cycles that keep repeating the same patterns that are, sometimes a protective action to prevent feeling these same feelings of hurt and wounds that have happened in the past. And so all of this stuff, all of this pain that he's experienced, all these struggles, all of these dysfunctional relationships with the feminine, these hold him back. So this is what keeps him enchained and enslaved to his past patterns and ways of being. So he has to break free, and he has some help here, right? So along their journey, they both are always divinely protected and supported, and they have entities that assist them. And so there's that element of the spiritual aspect of all of this. So he breaks free from Maleficent, and all the while this is going on, Aurora has been taken back to the castle, and she's in the process of finding out who she really is. And she's devastated because she feels as though this life is being forced upon her, and she doesn't really understand. It's a confusing time for her. It's a transformational time where she's kind of moving from her girlish innocence into womanhood, and she sort of feels like she's being forced onto a path that she's not sure that she wants. And so throughout the process of coming into this kind of more evolved aspect of herself and learning these lessons, she ends up becoming somewhat hypnotized by her own destruction. So she ends up meeting her fate, the spindle prick, and she ends up falling asleep. And her healing process, I think her being asleep, is really representative of the feminine having to go on this very deeply inward journey. And it almost feels like the world has moved on without her. And she's going through this really deep process of detoxification, of preservation, of preparation. And it's very interesting how they both are going on these healing journeys, but they're experiencing them in very different ways. And even the concept of time for both of them is somewhat different. It's like she has gone inward, time has slowed down. For her, it's like feeling into the feminine stillness and the vision and becoming this kind of inward seeking oracle. And for him, it's all about rising into this courageous action to embody the warrior, the overcoming of fear. And so the concept of time and their experience of their healing journey is not linear, and it's very different for both of them. So when he escapes from the castle, he takes off to go and find her, and he finds her, and she's now being guarded by Maleficent, who is now the dragon, and he has to fight the dragon. And the dragon is a really interesting energy. I think that the dragon really represents an awakening of the higher self, the spiritual self, and it's kind of like this burning away of the ego. It's a burning away of the karmic energy so that you can step into the dharmic energy, the divine destiny. And he has to cut his way through all these thorny bushes. And to me, this kind of just represents not just his willpower and his determination and his embodiment of the masculine energy, but it's like cutting through and overcoming the heaviness and the resistance that has been there for so long, that he's carried around with him for so long. So they've both been doing this work in very different ways, and both of these are very representative of the feminine and the masculine, and they're most embodied. So finally he makes his way to her, and they share true love's kiss, and she fully awakens and he is fully awakened, and they become who they were always meant to be. And as the kingdom rejoices and everyone comes together, they of course realize that they were always betrothed. They were always meant to be together all along. So their destiny was going to come to be regardless of the path that others may have wanted them to take, or the path that they may have thought they had wanted for themselves. It came into alignment exactly as it was meant to be. And I really think the takeaway there from this beautiful story is that you cannot miss what is yours, right? So while there was a lot of struggle there and a lot of difficulty and uncertainty and unknown, there was always the soul's calling and the soul's inner knowing of what was meant for them and where they were being led towards. And so the reason why I wanted to talk specifically about the Disney version of this story is because I think it's really interesting that we teach children as they're growing up that they can be anything, that they can believe that anything is possible for them. And I know for me, when I was growing up, I really remember that being hammered home, this idea of like, you can do and be and have anything you desire. But this always kind of was in relation to work or material things or things that were practical in their nature. But I really remember it kind of, this messaging always being present of, you can believe in anything except for a fairy tale. you can believe in anything except for love. That love needed to be practical. It needed to be logical. And we see this so present in the way that people come together in relationships with each other in the modern world. It's very transactional. I need this from you, you need this from me. This makes sense and is convenient for me in my life right now. This fills the specific role that people are expecting of me. Whatever that transactional experience of relating may be, it's not this experience of divine awakening and true love and soul encountered partnership. And I think that not a lot of people think this is possible, because in order to believe in this, you have to believe in magic, right? And you have to kind of suspend what is logical in order to believe in what is magical and what is led by the truth of the heart. And so I think it's really interesting that we show children these stories, and that there is so much allegory here for true love. And these stories have been passed down for centuries. They've been retold since the dawn of time. But then we tell children that it's silly to believe in them, and that that's not what love really is. So I hope you enjoyed discussing this story with me. I know I really like to think about this story, and it comes up a lot for me. And I just feel I really resonate with it and resonate with this kind of dynamic of the masculine and the feminine. So I hope that you have a beautiful rest of your day, and I will talk with you again soon.